Miami fans should be pleasantly surprised by a couple of under-the-radar Canes who stepped up and made plays in the Saturday scrimmage.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and writer for Canes County at Rivals. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Head over to TurboTax.com today and get matched with your expert. On this loaded episode, we will explain why, even though there's going to be some smoke screens out there over the next couple of weeks, Cam Ward is absolutely a lock, number one overall to the Tennessee Titans. We'll have for you Mario Cristobal's thoughts that he shared right afterwards on the super secret scrimmage that happened this past Saturday. Final scrimmage, before the big scrimmage that's coming up is going to be this coming Saturday for the spring game. We're 5 days away from that. We'll have practices on Tuesday, Thursday, and then we'll blow it out with the spring game, Cobb Stadium on Saturday afternoon. We'll also talk about a couple of surprise standouts because, folks, again, this is the time of year where not only, do you want your star players to really rise to the top? We've talked about guys like Ruben Bain having really good spring periods so far, Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle, Josiah Trader, who could be Miami's top receiver this year, has had a really good spring, but this is also a time where you want to have not only depth emerging from your squad, but some players who, maybe we weren't thinking about a whole lot, maybe had a quiet season last year, didn't have these guys on your bingo card for, coming out and having big performances. And for a couple of those this past Saturday, now top secret scrimmage, of course, but some of the intel leaks out. Like I know our guy D Money from CanesInsight.com gets, special double secret probation type of access to this stuff. And a couple of players that, were noted, and again, guys you may not have expected who made plays in this scrimmage on Saturday. We'll start on the offensive side of the football. Backup running back Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, the Hellcat, scored a touchdown in the scrimmage, and he was noted as someone who has added quality weight since last season. And I've seen that in person as well. The spring practices I've been able to go out to, you do notice a guy like Chris Wheatley-Humphrey, who was true freshman last year, a little bit skinny. He's putting on some size, putting on some weight, which is going to help him put some power to hopefully go along with that speed. And I don't think Hellcat has lost any of that speed that he came out of high school with. So him scoring a nice touchdown in the scrimmage, I think that's a really good sign. And, this is a player that, obviously we were excited about coming into Miami last year. We're still excited about Hellcat. We know how strong the top of Miami's running back rotation is with Mark Fletcher and Jordan Lyle expected to make out maybe the top running back duo in the ACC, but you're going to need to be 3, if not 4 deep when it comes to big-time contributors at running back. And, Wheatley-Humphrey last season, true freshman, he still was able to hold on to his red shirt, but just 1 carry for 7 yards last year. So we haven't seen a whole lot of the Hellcat yet. And, maybe he's someone who has an opportunity to emerge into that running back rotation this year. Obviously, Miami has a promising true freshman as well in Gerard Pringle. Can Gerard Pringle have the type of impact in his first year that Jordan Lyle had last year or Mark Fletcher had the year before? That is yet to be seen. But in the meantime, you know what Miami's got at the top of their running back rotation? And to hear that Chris Wheatley-Humphrey made a play, at least a play, multiple plays, I believe, and had a good scrimmage is a really good sign. And we're going to get a closer look at this player, all of us, when it comes to that Saturday spring game coming up. So here's one on defense, and a similar situation to Wheatley-Humphrey in a lot of ways. Second-year guy, didn't play a whole lot last year, was maybe a little bit smaller, skinnier, is putting some size onto his frame. How about Marquise Lightfoot, Miami's second-year defensive end, described by Canes Insight as very explosive and physically powerful for a lighter player, getting more and more reps with the ones, D Money said. So Marquise Lightfoot, and this is a guy who's not completely under anyone's radar if you pay attention to recruiting. Lightfoot was on some recruiting services a 5-star by the time he signed with Miami in the class of what would that have been, 2024. Was a 4-star, 5-star on some of the recruiting services. Was a big time player that Miami beat Ohio State out for. And if you guys recall, a year ago, Lightfoot, who was an early enrollee, I thought had a really good spring and had a pretty good spring game last year. So the fact that he continues to add some power and is getting more prominent reps with the allegedly the first team defensive line, I am here for it, because as deep as we can make that Miami defensive line rotation, right? Because there's a lot of stars there, right? We expect the guys who are going to start most, if not all, of the games, Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain, but to have depth pieces behind them like Malik Bryant and Cole McConaughey, Hayden Lowe is a true freshman who's been cracking skulls and doing really well. Guys who can play multiple spots on the defensive line like Armando Blunt. I think he can be a big-time factor this year. So, yeah, if Marquise Lightfoot can get himself very much into that rotation. And guess what? Another thing about Lightfoot, when you talk about him, being a little bit slight of frame, but packing power for a lighter guy, I'm sure that his defensive line coach, his defensive end coach, Jason Taylor, probably sees a lot of similarities in himself. When Jason Taylor, coming out of high school, playing in Akron, is a lanky, scrawny guy, but with just unbelievable instincts, and literally grew into becoming a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Hopefully Jason Taylor sees some of those, past similarities in Lightfoot, and he's working with him to bring out the best. And so Marquise Lightfoot probably got I think he got some special teams work. He didn't have any defensive stats last season. I looked that up, but this could be a year when, Lightfoot can have an opportunity to really break out and do well. And so, okay, here's the big picture look from Miami's scrimmage this past Saturday at Green Tree. Mario Cristobal laid it out in no uncertain terms. The defense won that scrimmage, okay? And there's a good way to look at that, and there's a not so good way to look at that. But here's what Mario Cristobal said. He gave the defense credit in two areas, because he said Miami's offense did a good job running the football, but throwing the football was inconsistent, he said. On the defense, the way that they affected the pocket and affected the passer was really effective. And then coverages were really, they were on point, really snug and just locked up and very competitive. Every ball seemed to be contested at some point in time. A little bit of success in the red zone for the offense he meant, but overall, the defense had a better day than the offense today. All right, so this is one of those double-edged swords. We know Miami has just vastly improved personnel in the defensive secondary. Xavier Lucas is someone who's having a really awesome spring period. Zechariah Poyser, new safety, really awesome spring period. Charles Brantley is doing well. Like, a bunch of Miami's defensive backs are having really good periods and making it difficult on the receivers. So I don't know, and I'll be honest with you, the times that I've been at practice and I've watched drills, I've seen the receivers make plays. So I'm not going to look. Some of you might say, oh no, Donno, this means the receivers can't get open. They can't create any separation. We're in real trouble from a wide receiver standpoint. That really doesn't match up with what I've seen at other parts in spring. Like, I've seen guys like Trader and recently CJ Daniels and Malachi Toney and Joshua Moore make some plays. So I'm gonna chalk that one up to, with the separation thing, I'm gonna chalk that up to being a mostly positive for the defensive backs. Now, in terms of the inconsistencies in the passing game, I think it is fair to say we're not seeing elite and consistent quarterback play in spring football to this point. Now, a big part of that is excusable, because we all know who Miami's starting quarterback is going to be, Carson Beck, and we all know he's not cleared to throw yet coming off of the elbow. So it's the other three quarterbacks. It's Emory Williams, Judd Anderson, and true freshman Luke Nickel. So do I wish at this point that at least one of those guys was looking like an absolute stud? Like, hey, maybe this guy can push Carson Beck for his job. Sure. But, keeping in mind, none of these three are expected to be starters for Miami this year. Like, there's a little understanding that goes into that. On an encouraging note, we have heard and seen some positive things about Nickel lately, that the game might be slowing down for him. But again, true freshman, there's going to be a learning curve for him. So yeah, I mean, I think part of the defense, winning that scrimmage, a little bit of that has to be chalked up to the fact that we don't even have QB1 out there, fully throwing at this point, which we hope happens really soon. I'm also, though, and I know Cristobal said that the offense has been running the ball pretty well. I see nothing wrong from, a macro standpoint with the defense being ahead of the offense right now. I mean, Miami's offense a year ago at this time was way ahead of the defense. And what did we see during this? We saw the best offense in the country, but we saw a defense that let us down time and time and time again. So for the defense to kind of even the score a little bit, I'm cool with that. We got a lot more coming up on this episode, folks. I want to give you, in each position group, a player that I'm most excited about and an X Factor player. People have questions. I want to answer questions from the Locked On Canes insiders. You all want to know who's going to transfer out, who's going to transfer in. We're 8 days away from the transfer portal opening up. It's going to be a wild ride, and you want to keep it locked right here because we're only getting started on this brand new Locked On Canes. You know what season it is? It is tax season. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their individual attention, undivided, as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, and no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you for making this Monday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're going to have a bonus episode tonight. We're expecting J.J. Sparks, new Miami Hurricanes interior offensive line commitment. So make sure you check out to that. Check that out. Check out to that. Whew. My brain is still in weekend mode. And make sure you guys check out a new episode of Locked On ACC coming up later on today as well. All right. So let me give you guys position groups here. We'll go spot by spot, a player. And this is not necessarily me telling you this is the best player at every position, but a player I'm most excited about at every position group and an X factor or two. So, okay, just reinforcing what we were saying about quarterback position. Yeah, I'm most excited about Carson Beck. We haven't, and I can't emphasize this enough, from a film study standpoint, from a leadership, mentorship standpoint, all the mental reps that go into preparing yourself when you're not cleared to throw yet. Beck, by all accounts, is doing a really good job. And in fact, I like that this happened over the weekend. I'm not happy that I wasn't invited to this, by the way, Carson. You let me down here. But Beck, he took his offensive line, his running backs, his receivers. He took them out to Prime 112 for a Saturday night dinner. So that is team building at its finest. I appreciate that from Beck. And, again, if at any point this year, if we do have to see backup quarterbacks play meaningful snaps, I'm happy that Emory Williams, Judd Anderson, and Luke Nickel have had the opportunity to have more reps this spring than they usually would without Beck being there, without Beck throwing, I should say. So hopefully these guys are more ready if that does come up this year. But Miami's got to need QB1 full go. And, it sounds like he's close. It sounds like he's close to being able to throw. I know they're taking it easy with him, but, for a guy who a year ago at this time was considered the Heisman front runner, Miami needs him. Running back. I'm going to go, and this is no slight to Mark Fletcher. Like Mark Fletcher, we have unconditional love for Fletch. It's just understood. So I'm going to say most excited for Jordan Lyle, because I think Lyle can take a really big step from being an excellent, third back last year to being part of a 1-2 punch, a 1A or a 1B this year. So I'm going to go with Jordan Lyle, most excited for. And then, based on what we just said about Chris Wheatley-Humphrey making big plays in the scrimmage, I'm going to go Wheatley-Humphrey as an X factor guy that I'm excited about. Offensive line, I'm really pumped for Markel Bell. And the reason, and it's hard, right? Because who I'm most excited about on the O-line could have easily said CeCe Maui Noah, who's about to be a first-round draft pick in a year's time. Inez Cooper, who's on his last ride this year, fourth year, has had an incredible career. Is it the intrigue of James Brockermeyer, the new center? Is it the competition for left guard? But I'm going to go with Markel Bell as the guy that I'm most excited about, because I think for him, and this is going to be his first full season as a full-time starter, and the excitement that we're seeing and hearing from his development as what could really be an elite left tackle this year. And we saw him go through the growth and the journey last year with his on-the-job training when he had to play, a lot more due to injury to others last year. So for Markel Bell, I think that's the guy who probably excites me most. And then maybe if I'm going to go with an X factor, I'm going to go Ryan Rodriguez. He's been hardworking for the past 4 or 5 years that he's been within the program. He's been trying to earn his opportunity. He earned a start against Florida last year and got injured. He's back out there cracking skulls on that offensive line. So for Ryan Rodriguez, who I would imagine he's either going to be the starting left guard or he's going to be maybe the first guy off the bench in the offensive line rotation. So for Rodriguez, I'm very excited. For tight ends, Elijah Lofton. By the way, Elijah is another one that, I didn't mention him as guys making plays in the scrimmage because that's one that you expect, right? I brought up Wheatley-Humphrey, Marquise Lightfoot, but Elijah Lofton is out there making the most of his reps and opportunities every single day. I don't know if you're going to see a guy make like a bigger statistical jump from one year to another as Lofton. Like Lofton had I think 151 receiving yards last year, played a little sparingly because, Miami had Elijah Arroyo and Cam McCormick and Riley Williams at tight end. So he was behind a bunch of older guys. But Elijah Lofton is the one, always flashes in practice, lines up at multiple positions, and he's probably the most difficult mismatch for any opposing defense to cover. So what do? He can do everything. He can play everywhere except maybe quarterback. Although if Miami really got into dire straits, maybe you give him an opportunity. But he can do pretty much everything on that offense, including block, by the way. So Elijah Lofton. X factor for me is Alex Bauman, the transfer tight end from Tulane. Bauman's had some really good practices, and he seems really, really well-rounded, can block really well. And he's also, at his previous stop, he was a red zone weapon, scored a lot of touchdowns. So Alex Bauman, an X factor for me. At wide receiver, I'll go with JoJo Trader as the one that I'm most excited about. And then I think for X factor, I'll go with CJ Daniels. I know Daniels is a proven commodity. He's got over 2,000 career receiving yards and over 20 touchdowns, I think. So he's a proven commodity, but I'm just going to call Daniels an X factor because he's finally, as of the last week and a half, he's healthy and able to participate in spring. So he got a little bit of a late start, which means we haven't seen him a whole lot, which means we haven't really fully seen how he kind of fits in with his team. We haven't seen him catching passes from Carson Beck yet, but we've heard a lot about Daniels, about his leadership and his mentorship. He's a 6th-year guy, and he's an alpha dog, and he takes his younger teammates under his wing and all of that great stuff. And so I think the floor is pretty high for what CJ Daniels can do in Miami's offense this year. I think the question is, how high is the ceiling going to be? Is he going to come in here and have a Charleston Rambo type of impact as a transfer? And so I'm going to say Daniels is an X factor, but maybe he won't be so much of an X factor by the time we get through fall camp and really see what he can do. On the defensive line, probably the guy I'm most excited about, which is difficult to narrow it down, but I'm getting all the feels with Akeem Mesidor this year. All right, he didn't have to come back for his final season. Mesidor's having a great spring. He's got so much enthusiasm about the Corey Heatherman defense. He compared Miami's defense to French toast because it's imagine waking up every morning and your mom's making French toast. It's he's got this childlike enthusiasm for Corey Heatherman's defense. How can I not have enthusiasm for Hakeem Mesidor. So I'm going to go with Mesidor this year. I think either he or Bain are going to lead Miami in sacks this year. For an X factor, there's X factors all over the place on the defensive line. I'll probably say Hayden Lowe, the true freshman, gigantic, 6'4", 250 plus pounds. I'm going to go with Hayden Lowe as the X factor. At linebacker, I'm really excited this year about Raul Popo Aguirre. I think this is his year to really break out as probably a full-time starter. I really like Cameron Bobby Pruitt as an X factor because he's got like game-wrecking sort of playmaking potential with his physicality and his explosiveness. At cornerback, Xavier Lucas has been the guy who's exciting me the most right now. He's rare. His Zach Etheridge, his cornerbacks coach, talked about him last week, where you've got a 200-plus pound guy who's got really good twitch and quickness despite being a big corner, physical. So I'm excited for what Lucas is going to bring to the table. There's X factors all over the place at corner. I don't know. Maybe I'll say OJ Frederic taking the next step because he was really good last year. Can he become like a bona fide every single game lockdown guy? He was close to that last year. And then it's safety. The guy that I'm most excited about is Zechariah Poyser, transfer safety. I think he's been the most consistent in that room for Miami so far this spring, with Zaquan Patterson being the X factor. Now, Patterson, heading into his second year, like he just got healthy last week. I think it was the same day as CJ Daniels last Tuesday when Patterson was able to fully practice for the first time. And so now he's getting back to that full fitness and full go. All right, couple things, my friends, when we come back on this episode of Locked On Canes. I do want to answer some questions from you guys. Plus, I know if you watch NFL Network and you read some of these articles the next couple weeks, we're 2 weeks and change away from the NFL draft. They're going to try to convince you that, hey, maybe someone else is going to go number 1 overall. Cam Ward is an absolute lock, and we'll explain why. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done yet on this brand new Locked On Canes. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all your money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Guys, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much money I was spending and overspending on things like food delivery and streaming subscriptions. Now I buy smarter and I budget smarter and I save more. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball. Boy, was I wrong about Duke. Duke embarrassed me. They embarrassed themselves, blowing that game against Houston over the weekend. I'm very disappointed that I kept guaranteeing Duke was going to make it to the final game and win a championship. But you know what? You get surprises in the tournament. Make sure you check out our guys, Andy Patton and Isaac Shade, on Locked On College Basketball. They break it all down for you. So here on Locked On Canes, we get this question from Jake, who says, hey, so we've talked about running back 1 and 2 being Fletcher and Lyle. Who do you think will be running back 3? Do we have a standout third back? So here's the thing. I don't believe Miami has a standout third back. I talked about Chris Wheatley-Humphrey having a good scrimmage. I'm encouraged there. I've talked about Gerard Pringle showing good stuff in practice as a true freshman. I am encouraged there. I don't think, either of those guys has so far created this big amount of separation. So here's another factor that I will consider. Elijah Lofton. I mentioned he can do everything. You can line him up at tight end, receiver, line him up as a fullback, offensive tackle. You can line him up at running back as well. Let's not forget that, last spring, Miami had, almost zero healthy running backs a year ago in spring. It was like Chris Johnson and a bunch of injured guys in the running back room in spring last year. So Elijah Lofton got a lot of work at that point. I think he's still getting some work at running back. So do not be surprised if, even though he may not be a running back on the depth chart, if Elijah Lofton gets playing time at running back this year. But, I think we'll see a collective. I think we're going to see some of Lofton. I think we'll see a lot more of Chris Wheatley-Humphrey than we saw last year. And God willing, we see some Gerard Pringle as well, because I'm a huge fan of his. So I don't know if it's clear who the third running back is, but it might be Elijah Lofton. Sammy says, hey, this is more of a statement than a question. Special teams has got to be elite for us to be true national championship contenders, specifically speaking on our returns. If we have 5+ return touchdowns this year, that would be nice. He says, I think that puts us over the top. Offense will be good. Defense will be much improved. The only thing is special teams. If Miami were to get more than 6 kick returns for touchdowns, we're winning a national championship, right? I would settle for like 2 or 3. And listen, it was disappointing last year because Miami had a really fast kickoff returner, Chris Johnson. He had the speed. He just didn't have the shake, didn't have the moves. So he ran really, really fast into a lot of brick walls last year. So we need to find more dynamic return games, whether that be from someone like Nye Carr or Malachi Toney, Ray Joseph. I agree with you. We need to, and punt returns are tougher than ever to score on because, you see what's happened over the last 15 years. Every punter is Australian now. And all of the Aussie punters, they scramble around, they get all that time, and you fair catching all these Aussie punts. So kickoff returns are usually your better opportunities to score. If Miami can score 2 or 3 of those this year, I think we're pretty happy. 6 or more, get ready for a natty. And isn't the national championship game, is that at Hard Rock Stadium this year? It's either this year or next year. So, hey, maybe Miami gets that home game for the national championship game if they're returning 6 or 7 kickoffs for touchdowns this year. All right, so folks, I know that, as we lead up to the NFL draft, they broadcast this thing on ESPN NFL Network, and they want to make sure when you approach that first round, prime time on a Thursday night, you have as much suspense as possible. Hey, maybe the Titans won't draft Cam Ward. Maybe Shador's the guy. Or maybe somebody trades up to draft Cam Ward. Okay, so a couple things, folks. Ward, and again, they're going to try to build this suspense because they want everyone to tune in from the very first minute of the NFL draft. I guarantee you Cam Ward is the number 1 overall pick, and I guarantee you he's a Tennessee Titan. Look at a couple of important factors here. The Tennessee Titans have canceled workouts and meetings with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter over the past few days. You don't do that if you don't know who you're taking. If they don't know Cam Ward is their guy, they're not going to stop doing their due diligence with other players who they could select first overall. The Titans have decided, and by the way, by all accounts, if maybe several weeks ago they were open to kind of shop the pick, latest report that came out, I think it was from ESPN, claims that the Titans basically don't have an answer as to like what it would take to trade up to draft Cam Ward. There's not a price. They're not putting a price on that number 1 overall draft pick. So Cam Ward to the Titans looks like a lock. You have the reporting and the anecdotal evidence there. Now let's take a look at the odds, all right? Because, folks, the sports books are not in the business of losing money, okay? And if I pull up, and we're proudly sponsored by FanDuel, and if I pull up the FanDuel odds, Cam Ward's odds to go number 1 overall. Now, this is not necessarily to the Titans. The Titans are going to keep that pick, but Cam Ward's odds to go number 1 overall are now at minus 20,000. Do you know what that means? You would have to literally bet $20,000 to win $100 back on Cam Ward being drafted number 1. If that's not a statistical lock, I don't know what is. The next one in line is Abdul Carter at plus 1,800. So Cam Ward minus 20,000, Abdul Carter plus 1,800, Travis Hunter plus 5,000, Shedeur Sanders plus 6,500, Jackson Dart plus 15,000, Tetaroa McMillan plus 15,000. So there is so much separation now on Cam Ward being the number 1 overall draft pick. And there seems to be a clear reporting consensus that the Tennessee Titans are going to hold on to that pick. That, you can pretend smoke screens. Oh, maybe they won't do it. Cam Ward is going to be a Tennessee Titan. And congratulations in advance. I'm not saying this to jinx anybody, because I know wherever Ward ends up, I know he's going to have an awesome NFL career. I know he and his family have worked so hard to get to this point. Guys, thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you smash that thumbs up button, smash that like button, and subscribe. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So we'll talk to you again next time. We'll talk to you again later tonight with another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.